it's been a considered and now long-standing expectation from Beijing that they would try to smooth things over with India along the border.
Bottom line, they will continue to use that border at a time of their choosing.
The needling of Indian interests in places like Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, that will all continue. And so how India responds to each one of those things, and the ante will be upped over time.
Do you see China putting the pressure? Do you see China, letting India be and not putting any pressure on India for the next few months?
Gazing into my crystal ball, I foresee at least several months and possibly through almost a year of relative calm. I mean, I hate to make predictions because they're always wrong, but the reason for that is I think that it's been a considered and now long-standing expectation from Beijing that they would try to smooth things over with India along the border. And the reason for that is because, as I think I said before, diminishing returns to that type of sharp pressure along the border. And as I also said before, this is not a reconsideration of pressuring India strategically or a pullback on sort of the general Chinese attitudes about competition, including in India's neighborhood. All that continues. But I think it's time for a breather. I think that's consistent with China's kind of broader global approach. And I think that they are going to really want to feel out this new administration in Washington. And I think they feel that they have their hands full with that. And so they don't want to have an unnecessary complicating factor, which is also difficult to predict. And anything that they might do in the way that you've described would be difficult to predict. Now, if we get a year out, other things become possible, certainly, and especially back to the land border. I think China has unfortunately, a lot of asymmetrical advantages with respect to that. I think there's always the possibility that you would see other things contributing, including, say, succession scenario with the Dalai Lama, other things that would kind of tip us into a short-term political and then military crisis. Those things are all possible. And then the needling of Indian interests in places like Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, that will all continue. And so how India responds to each one of those things, and the ante will be upped over time. So this isn't going away, but I would say if I had to guess, we're on a bit of a pause.
Jonathan?
Right. I think if anything, China's trying to stabilize what they can in order to focus on what's coming with the U.S. I mean, Trade War II, I think, is going to keep them pretty well occupied. Their own focus on Taiwan, their own military buildup, which is principally focused on the first island chain. I think as much as we can talk about India having the traditional fear of a two-front war with Pakistan and China, I mean, China also has that concern and has going back to the early Cold War of the potential for a two-front problem in the Pacific and in the Indian Himalayas, which is part of why India has such prominence in their strategic worldview going all the way back to the beginning. But I imagine they're going to have their hands full with the United States, and at the same time, the way that they have played that border for the since the very beginning is one in which they can create crises, have pressure, not necessarily control those crises, and I think none of that is gone in any real way, even if we've had this disengagement moment and the sort of new Xi Modi meeting, these sorts of things. Bottom line, they will continue to use that border at a time of their choosing. So I think it's still in the picture. And as to the maritime side, it depends on how serious things get in the Western Pacific. But India still has the problem of enormous infrastructure and investment and trade saturation across the entirety of the Indian Ocean rim. And in a world in which China did not have pressure in the West Pacific, they would be flowing military forces across that. And I think they still intend to do that in the long-term future. So India is going to have to focus on a very broad strategic environment here. And the U.S., the more Indian Ocean focused we can be in addition to our Western Pacific strategy, I think the more we're dealing with China's real long-term game And that's an area where U.S. and India can collaborate to put counter pressure on China, and we should be really focused on that.